So I'm just trying to get there.
I'll go sitting by ourselves. The other side of you, you know? Trying to get away from the camera. I know it. No, it's like you record sitting here by yourself. It was like that earlier.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Ken.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Without you, guess what? We don't have a class. So it's always good for you to be here. That helps. And for those that are visitors here today, this is a discussion class. We want to hear from you. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Keep your comment brief, but please comment. We want to hear from you. And today we're studying a new story. It's a story of Jacob. And we just finished the book of Ruth. And I hope you got as much out of that as I did. I also want to say, you know, my hearing is bad. I've had a bad cold and it's worse today. So, and I haven't had any sleep. I couldn't remember Moses, my ear's name, which has only been in my house half a dozen times. We've had a dozen conversations. So Moses, I'm sorry about that. But Marge is going to make some announcements. One is going to make an announcement, and then Ken Dedeker wants to say just a couple of words, and I want to hear from him. But Marge, you go first.
Well, I just wanted to, good morning. I just wanted to introduce people, but I didn't catch all their names. So maybe they can help us out. These are folks who are from near Nashville. I remember that.
Yes,
How's that?
Yes,
Goodness.
they're Highland Academy.
Highland Academy. Who
Yeah.
knows where Highland Academy is? Oh, yeah, some of these people do.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and your name?
David, Bryson, and Alicia.
Welcome.
Yes,
Thank
we're
you for
glad
being
that you're here. And you want to introduce these people because you know him.
This is Moses Meyer. Of course, I don't know his wife's name.
And the baby?
The baby is Lana.
Lana.
Oh,
Oh, yes. These guys, we're glad that they're here.
Yeah.
They're part of your following,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, here's some more people over here because well, go ahead and introduce your mother.
So, my mom is visiting from Bolivia.
Oh,
Wow.
She,
Did you warn her what this class is like?
yeah, she's a little shy, so she won't speak, but she'll listen.
okay.
But you're not shy, are you? No.
We know each other from about 30 years ago.
30 years ago. Wow, that's really cool. And this isn't your brother, it's your,
It is my boyfriend,
Yeah.
Edgar.
Well, that's good.
yes.
Yeah.
And should we introduce anybody here? Well, somebody's graduating.
Well, yeah, you go ahead, Roman, and.
You got it, yeah.
Sure. Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm also graduating. So.
Oh, you are?
I am.
Wow,
So it's
I
a-
thought
it's a
because he
big
had a
weekend.
tie on.
Oh, wow.
No, I was just talking to him about when we were in academy where the guys had to wear ties
Oh,
to,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
hi, everybody. I'm Roman. I'm also graduating. This is my lovely girlfriend, Mara.
Okay, Laura.
I graduate next year.
Oh, okay. And do you have a job now or are you going on to graduate school?
Most likely Advent Health in Florida.
Oh, do they pay good? I was just making a joke. I don't know. Good morning. Glad you're here. I don't want to miss anybody because I don't want people to feel left out. I think we got it, didn't we?
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you. But the one, you go, and then we're gonna let Ken talk first.
I just want to remind people about our potluck next week. It's going to be in the pavilion, which is just out beyond this building. And bring your favorite potluck dishes and everything will be set up for you. Just come and let's enjoy some good time together. Doug and Lorraine Tilstra will be here joining us as well. And they're looking forward to it, you being
Doug
there.
will be here. Great to see Ken. Ken, would you mind speaking now?
Probably go first.
I know. If I don't fall over first. Yeah. I just wanted to take a minute to thank this class. Without all the cards and visits and things coming, it would have been a lot tougher. Yeah, I had a laminectomy, got infected. You can possibly imagine, for 2 months of just agonizing pain. So we fused the low back, and in the process, I had a pulmonary embolus. Pretty close coming to the end. That point, but rehabbing now, spent about a month in inpatient rehab, and now almost about a month in outpatient, which is several more months. It's a slow process, but I appreciate you guys did all the cards that came. It really did help in this class. Whoever really pushes that and visits from several of the class as well. So, and thank you. This class is very special.
I want you to take this wrong way, but Ken is a little older than me. And I hope my mind is half as sharp as his if I live to be his age. It's amazing, Ken, really, sharp as you are. Roy isn't here today. I'm sure he and Joe are having a good time. Bill, would you have our prayer, please?
Loving God, we come to you this Sabbath morning and ask that you would study the life of Jacob, pray that we can learn from his mistakes, successes, make our lives more in tune with your plan for us.
Thank you. Have you ever met someone you felt could not be a candidate to follow Jesus? I mean, they would be the most unlikely guy or gal that you've ever met, that you just don't think that following Jesus is on the agenda for this person. And then they fooled you at the end. Or later on, they fooled you. Have you seen or experienced someone like that? I have, but I want to hear from you. Have you just been shocked later on that you found out that woman is actually a pastor, or, well, you can't be a pastor, sorry. Whatever you are supposed to be. Or, you know, a true follower of Jesus. Have you had that experience? Yes, Bob.
I've had many students through the years, and some of the rabble-rousing, dishonest troublemakers become some of the truest Christian, loving people.
Oh. That's amazing. Yes.
My husband, John, who most of you know, was one of those boys. He was just the pain in the neck at the academy, just very rebellious, and at 19, had an experience with the Lord that just.
What a kind-hearted person John is. Just, I don't know him that well, but man, what a very generous person. Anyone else?
We had that same experience at the different academies that we worked at. And it's so beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful to see that. So those of you going into academy work, please keep that in mind. Good morning.
I knew this, he wasn't my friend in high school. Well, first of all, Jim Llewellyn, I was talking to somebody about this, the most unlikely candidates. And Jerry Arnold told me that Jim Llewellyn, Pastor Jim, told him that he saw his high school coach of just a few years ago, and his football coach. And the coach was this, he says, "Well, what are you doing now?" And Jim said, "Well, I'm a pastor." And the coach stood there for a minute. And he said, "Man, I didn't see that one coming." When I was in high school, there was this guy named Randall. I'm like a very small freshman, maybe one of the smallest guys in high school, big school. And there was Randall, who was like, you know, junior. Randall was a rough character. And it was a rough high school, Chatsworth, Georgia, back in the sixties, rough. Fighting, and more fighting, and when you're the smallest guy in the school, you're not necessarily a candidate to be a great fighter. And, I was afraid of it. So time goes on, and I see Randall a few years, 10 years after high school, down in Chatsworth for some reason, and I see him, I said, Randall, how are you? He said, oh, I'm very fine, I'm very good, thank you. Where'd that voice come from? And I said, well, what are you doing now? He said, well, I'm a pastor of a little church just north of here, and I sing in a quartet on the weekends and what? Really? You're not in prison? So it happens. Today we study about a family that was totally blessed by God. And they are totally dysfunctional. I've seen some pretty screwed up families, and I'm sure a lot of you relate to that. But this group, to be as lucky as they were, just takes the cake. They are something. They appear to be just surrounded by drama. Recently, some students asked me, what was the one thing in my business that I do not put up with, I don't allow? And you would have thought it would have been this or that. Drama. Just can't do it. Give me the facts, give me the story. I don't need all the emotional baloney that comes with it. Tell me the problem. Let's try to solve it. I don't want to hear, oh, it's drama. Well, he did this, you know, if you'd have just, give me the facts. Talk about it. And recently, one of the top dogs in our organization came in pounding the table. And I think he got the message very quickly that this was the last time I would be hearing that. Looking for a job. Now let's solve the problem. Solve it. And he doesn't even work for me. And I've come to the conclusion that most of the deception that we see in life is caused by a lack of faith. Be deceitful. Let's read Genesis 25, 21 through 34. Genesis 25. One through 34. I'll start. And this, we've got a long scripture reading this morning. So I'm going to stop, and whoever starts, don't just read a verse. Read 10 or 12 verses. Go down to a couple of paragraphs because it's a bunch to read. So let's start with Genesis. We're going to read this in 3 different sections. Okay, we're going to talk about this scripture first, and then we'll come back and talk about the others. Okay, I'll start first. Genesis 25, 21 through 34. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Can you guys hear me? Okay, because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "What is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people are within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger.
And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. After that came out his brother. His hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, man of the field. Jacob was a plain man dwelling in.
Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew." Famished. That is why he was also cooking ahead of him. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So we swore on oath to him, selling his birthrights to Jacob. Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. Esau despised his birthright.
Okay. Pretty quick transaction there, wasn't it? Also, we want to thank our Zoom viewers this morning. Thank you for zooming in. Please note how at the beginning, Isaac and Rebekah seem to be very spiritual. They're praying for a family. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. 2 nations, 2 people. The older shall serve the younger. One is a skillful hunter. The other is a man of the field. After what we just read here, what is our first clue that this family is headed for trouble? As a parent.
Showing preference amongst kids.
Sorry?
Showing preference amongst kids.
Exactly. I have 4 kids, and I have tried my darndest to never show preference. And there has been times I was close to showing it. Like the word is killing going through my mind here. But fortunately, I've learned just to sleep on it before you react. You really get blindsided. Showing preference among children. I just, and I know Moses and his wife are new parents and they'll have, I'm sure, more kids. But it is just the worst thing you could possibly do. Stanley or Renee are not here. Leona, you've seen things like this, I'm sure, in your career, that preferences among children did not lead to a happy ending at times. Yeah. And my brother always told that my mother preferred me over him. And if she did, I can tell you he had a tough time because she was hard on me, let me tell you.
Oh, he was just raising his.
The thing that I was questioning on this,
Let me get over there so I can hear you, Jimmy, just a sec. Yeah, go ahead.
it's always questioning in my mind, is selling the birthright to a brother? I didn't have any brothers, but I had cousins that lived with us, and they were like brothers. When they were selling anything, you took what it fought it out in the backyard.
Yeah.
I never could understand that, how you sell something like that to a brother.
I don't think we ever will.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that. This is really unusual. I don't know of any other stories like this in the Bible. This is an unbelievable event. The children are getting preference from certain parent, or so one parent or another. And Isaac favors Esau and Rebekah favors Jacob. Isaac grew up, please remember this, Isaac, the dad here, grew up in a household where one child was favored over the other. Remember that story? Ishmael, Isaac. So Isaac was immersed in this. Remember, Sarah finally just made her husband send Hagar and Ishmael away. Ishmael is 15 years old. And I read this story again and some different, scholars, right? This wounded Abraham deeply. Your wife makes you send your son away. It was her idea to have this son to begin with. Now he wants this kid sent off. So Isaac has seen this. This is no new deal to him. He grew up in it. It's just, the more things change, the more they stay the same. This was a lot of drama. That boy got sent off. 15 years old. At 15 years old, Esau sells his birthright. I found this interesting. The bowl of lentil stew that was being prepared or was prepared was probably for Isaac, the dad. Abraham has just passed away. And lentils are a dish that Jews eat as a sign of mourning. So many scholars believe that was just a treat for Isaac, the dad, because his dad, Esau's grandfather, passed away. Esau despised his birthright and sold it for a meal. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Jacob got up one morning and said, hey, look around here at all this wealth my dad has, all these people. And that morning he just said, I'm going to try to get this birthright. You think that just happened that morning? Yeah. Wow.
His mom had been told by the Lord that Esau would serve Jacob. So it was gonna happen, maybe just not this way.
Yeah. Any other comments on that? Yes.
Well, Esau seems pretty, I know of family kind of like this where the older got offered the farm and he was reckless, and Esau seems reckless to me. I mean, like he didn't care. He was ready to give it up. Oh, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Jacob was plotting for it also, right?
Yeah.
There was that.
Yeah.
Remember in the story of Ruth, marrying Ruth, it wasn't just inheriting the land, it was also marrying her. Same thing with the birthright. It wasn't just the wealth of inheritance, it was the spiritual guidance. And Esau did not want to have to be burdened by that. He had married women from outside and he just wanted to live a free life. So he didn't want to have that spiritual responsibility and be the spiritual guide of the family.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. Yes.
Sibling rivalry's been around forever.
Yes, go ahead.
And on top of that, it's really hard for siblings to deal with the favorite child of the parents to start with. And with the firstborn male getting special treatment, special money and stuff like that, that's hard to live with, but you can justify because everybody else has to deal with it. When you're also a twin and you're born on the exact same day, and if you had come out first, it would have been your inheritance. I think it's a little bit harder to accept the favorite child who gets treated better than the rest of them just because of that.
Yeah,
It probably bothered him his whole life.
I'm sure it is. John?
Well, since Jacob's hand came out first, maybe he was first. Get it from that standpoint. Also find that opposites attract. Isaac didn't see very well, and he was kind of a mama's boy. Esau might have been the kind of guy he wished he had been.
Well, that's true.
Being
Yeah,
able to be free and go where I want, when I want, who I want.
yeah, that's a good point.
In
Good point.
addition to that, I'm going to mention that Jacob satisfied things at home. Esau, these things look like mundane, boring things. Sometimes administration of business is boring.
Thank you, John. Verbal bantering disputes have been going on for quite a while with these two boys. Jacob knew that Esau saw very little value in that birthright, as Marlene was telling us. So Jacob goes forward with his plans. Now, I have twin grandsons that are 15 years old. These boys are 15 years old, Jacob and Esau, when this happened. 15. I just can't imagine, and my twins, trust me, are not perfect. I can't imagine them behaving this way. And they're human beings. I mean, they have, you know, their wants and then what they think they need. And, but it is, I guess I'm saying this because I've been around twin boys for 15 years. And they're pretty good kids so far. But it's foreign to me, try to project into these two personalities. Yeah.
Well, I think everybody in this room knows there's two kinds of twins. I have identical. Personalities are very old, getting older, they are.
Yeah.
You know, their personalities tend to show. So obviously Jacob and Esau were fraternal. We know that Jacob or Esau was the one with the red hair.
Yeah.
Obviously their personalities were very, very different. One of the reasons that they did, compounded by.
Yeah, these twins of mine are not identical. And I've always called, I'm gonna stop today after this lesson. I've always called the oldest one the hunter. The golden-haired second twin stands behind him when they're little and pushing him to try the new tricycle or the new little toy. You get on it first. So I always call, Nate was just the kid that was kind of behind, waiting to see what the hunter did. But I'm not going to call Nick a hunter anymore after this lesson. This to me only confirms the drama that was in that family. Now, let's get into the big chapter. Genesis 27, 1 through 46. And this is where I want you to bite off a bunch when you're reading. Go to chapter 27. We've got 46 verses to read. Genesis 27, 1 through 46. And I'll start, and then you just chime in and read a bunch, okay? When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go after the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. And take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies."
Look, Jacob replied to Rebekah, "My brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of blessing me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you to do. Go out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son Jacob. She covered his arms with the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. And then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread.
He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord, your God, gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so that I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are or not." Jacob went close to his father, who touched him and said, voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy, like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son, Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied.
Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. He brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew, earth's richness, abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you curse, those who bless you."
Now it happened, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also had made savory food and brought it to his father. He said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game. Your soul may bless me." Father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" So he said, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, "Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed." Esau heard the words of his father. He cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. He said to his father, "Bless me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came with deceit, taken away your blessing."
Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named? Second time he has taken advantage of me. Took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants. I have sustained him with grain and what can I possibly do?" Esau said to his father, "You have only one blessing, my father. Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept aloud. Father Isaac answered, Dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your father. But when you grow restless, throw his yoke from you." Esau held a grudge against Jacob, blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "Days of the mourning for my father are near, and I will kill my brother Jacob."
Rebecca was told what her older son Esau had said. She sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while and fury subside. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back, and from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Rebekah said to Isaac, disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. "Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these. My life will not be worth living." Or drama.
We know that Isaac is now old, but what else might have been? We won't dwell on this, but I just found this very interesting. We know that Isaac is old, obviously, but what else might have been on his mind when he called in Esau to give him his blessing? And I know that that's pretty broad, but if you read probably some notes in your Bible there, what else might have been on Isaac's mind there?
He was trying to withhold the truth from Rebecca.
Hold on just a minute. What now?
He was trying to withhold the truth, his real intentions from Rebecca, because he knew that Rebecca would have not agreed with him.
Right? That's true.
Property. Property.
Property. One other thing that I read that I thought was interesting. Ishmael, Isaac's brother, lived to be 100, and it's hard to keep all the players straight here. I mean, you got, but anyway, there was Isaac and Ishmael, and Ishmael has just died. He lived to be 137 years old. He had just died, but he lived to be 137. At this point, Isaac is 137 years old. So he's thinking, my time is short. He lives another 43 years, believe it or not. He thinks he's dead or about to die. Another 43 years. What is Isaac about to do wrong? I mean, this is probably the dumbest question of the morning, but what's he about to do that's going to be so wrong?
Disobey God.
Isaac is acting deceptively and plans to disobey the fact that God has told him the older son will serve the younger. This is the act of someone who believes in God, yet for some reason refuses to follow directions. They always look for a reason to get what they want. Have you ever heard stories about people who did things that turned out to blow up in their face? They said, well, we prayed about it, and I guess it just wasn't God's will. Well, I guess it wasn't. I guess it wasn't his will. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, but it has happened. God did give you a brain, and he probably wants you to use it. So just, you know what I'm saying. I'm not saying you shouldn't pray about everything that you do, but there's certain things you know are wrong. So let's just don't go down that trail and try to justify it, I guess. And in his mind, from what I read, this game that he's going to eat, the stew, if it was done very quickly, if he could get it in there, get everything made before he died, this would be a sign from God that what he's about to do is the correct thing to do. Now, I thought that was kind of a stretch, but you wouldn't believe how many different opinions are among scholars about this story. I even read that from one guy who I think is totally off base, that Rebecca never even told Isaac about her vision, and one would be older than the other. When I read it, I called Jerry Arnold. I said, what do you think about this? I said, this whole lesson then is upside down, I've prepared. But Ken, come on. You've got a brain. You really think that she went her whole life without telling her husband? And so I don't have to erase the lesson. That's not the case. But this might be a sign of God's approval, even though why, this is the big question though. Why did Isaac tremble so violently? I think that's the question of the morning, one of them. Why was he so shook up when he discovered what was happening? Rob?
To answer that question, what if he did not disobey God? Maybe God's statement that the older will serve the younger was a forecast. Then all of a sudden he realized he just made that forecast come true.
Yeah. True.
You have a hand here.
What?
Dad?
Yeah. Go ahead.
For
For me, one of the takeaways of this lesson is even if I know something is God's will, I have to let him do it in his timing, not my timing.
That's tough too, because I need it right now. I'm hurting. I can't get this part of the deal done until I need it now. Yes.
After Jerry prayed and his wife had told him that Jacob should get the blessing, not Esau. But then he was making sure that it was Esau, but it turns out it wasn't. Then he might have been shook up that he was urging him all this time to do it one way, and he was definitely defying her to do it another way. Turns out it happened anyway, so he feels a little double tricked.
Yeah. He finally realized he was about the mistake. He had just almost made the mistake of his life. If Abraham had been your father, like he was Isaac's father, and you had been going against God's will and your faith was that weak, wouldn't you have thought back to the day that you were laying across an altar as a young man and Abraham was about to sacrifice you, and because of faith, you were saved? This is the same guy. The same guy that saw what happened. Of course, time takes away a lot of memories, doesn't it? How would you feel if you were about to disrupt the whole plan of salvation? Yes.
Saw an interesting quote yesterday on a sign in Ottawa. It said, one thing we've learned from history is that we do not learn from history.
Ah.
Yeah, and believer in that. Rebecca, let's talk about her for just a second, and I'm gonna power through this. I want to read you something I wrote about 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, about a guy that I met 25 years ago. I want to share that with you. The title of this lesson is Scoundrels. Scoundrels that you've met that turned out to be great people in your life. So Rebecca overhears Isaac's plan to give the blessing, but she panics. She knows the blessing is to go to Jacob. She comes up with this plan of deception. Do you think she was trying to protect her husband or protect her son? Her son? Some believe she's trying to protect her husband because of the big mess he's about to start. I think she's trying to protect her son. Some scholars say Rebecca had got a bad rap. There's nowhere in the scriptures did it say that Rebecca told Isaac of the prophecy. We think that's baloney. We do. So this scholar thinks she's a heroine. Do you think he told him, obviously. Let's talk about Jacob for a minute. Jacob tries to tell his mother the plan is just too risky. Rebecca will not be swayed. She says, if God curses anyone, let it be on me. But Jacob lies 3 times. First, yes, I'm your son, Esau, firstborn. Yes, game, the stew, the Lord brought it to me. And then the 3rd time, he confirms in the lie, I am Esau. Esau was a mighty warrior, and only one other person in the Bible is called a mighty warrior, which is Nimrod. Esau wants the blessing, but he's not willing to bear the responsibility of being a man of faith. Esau then goes to his uncle Ishmael's clans and marries his daughter. This was done just to, do you think this was done to spite his father or to gain some credibility with his father? Marrying his cousin, Ishmael's clan, a tough crowd. People believe he's trying to impress his dad, that he's trying to do the right thing here, marrying his cousin, uncle's kid. His dad might change his mind about the blessing. Yes.
I think he's trying to punish his mother. He's trying to punish his mother because his mother and Ishmael didn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
for him to marry into that family was
This blow to the mother.
That's a great point. More drama.
How long did she live though? She died before Jacob ever came back.
That's one point, one tragedy of the story. She never saw Jacob again the rest of her life. Never saw her son. Genesis 28, 1 through 17, this is where, we won't read that, but this is where Jacob sees the vision. Jacob is running for his life and he's 40 miles from home. He's wondering how he got into this mess now and finally got the message about the vision. It's interesting to me that Jacob gets this huge blessing, this outpouring of a blessing, and he's really not, to me, totally repentant. How can that be? Remember the parable of the workers? Matthew 21 through 16, some were hired at 9 o'clock, some were hired at 12, some at 3, and some at 5 in the afternoon. They all got paid the same. This to me is another example of that parable. God is going long ball with Jacob. He's hoping. Putting him in the team, only taking him off the bench and putting him in to be the star of the team here. Hoping he can deliver. Some of us need discipline. Some of us need courage. Yes.
Ken, why don't you go first?
Yes, sorry, Ken.
There's a hint here in verse 20 that Jacob was not really believing in God. At least the version I'm looking at says, but Isaac said to his son, "How is it you found it so quickly, my son?" Jacob answers, "Because the Lord, your God." Doesn't say anything about it being my God. More than one version has that. It makes me wonder. Parents have kind of screwed up both of these kids at this point. After a Christian, you even wonder whether Rebecca ever became a believer. Jacob was closer to her. Did he believe in God or not until he saw that?
Thank you. This is the last question for you. Which of the four do you think demonstrated the least amount of faith in God?
With you, it's drama. With me, it's self-righteousness.
Yeah.
It's when somebody blows it, makes a mistake, and they try to spin it and spin it and spin it to make it right.
Yeah.
And so what I respect is somebody who bellies up and looks at you and says, "I blew it, and I gotta fix this, and I gotta help fix it." You respect a person more when they do that. And when you look back at these people, these friends you had that became pastors, and you can't see how that happened. Somewhere in their lives, they looked in the mirror and said, I'm blowing it. And they turned it around. That's where greatness comes in. And that's what I carry away from this lesson so far, that sometime today I'm gonna blow it. And so will you. And so I'm not gonna spin it, but I am gonna try to fix it.
Yeah, that's great. John, yeah, quickly.
Every person in this story was disobedient to God. They're always trying to accomplish something in their own way. God overruled it and brought his plan into fruition. Of all the people who was the most righteous, the guy that saw he was wrong and repented, that was Jacob.
Amen.
Great point. Great point. Who do you think demonstrated the least amount of faith here? My last question. Not a trick question. You look at these four people, who do you think was the most deceitful of the crowd?
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Thinks that God desperately needs her.
Yeah, I thought it was Isaac, and then I thought Rebecca. And then Jacob. What a crowd. Nice bunch to have over potluck. We could pick up some stories there, couldn't we? Yes.
With that question, I think what's striking me is that, Rachel, maybe even Sarah and Rebecca, they're mothers. And they know what God has told them. And they're helping God along and manipulating. And of course, I'm a mother of 7 children and I'm thinking, wow, I've never done that, but actually I have, and it's kind of sobering. Helping God along. So anyway, that's.
Oh, thanks. Joseph.
I think it's interesting. Sometimes I wish God would tell me the plan he has for my life. And
Yeah.
you see this in the Bible. He tells people what his plan is for them, and then they try to go and fulfill it themselves. It ends up messing the whole thing up, the process. And so sometimes it's God having mercy on me to say, just trust me, have faith in me. Because if I were to tell you the plan, go try doing it yourself and not trusting in me to do it.
Just to top that one, or not top it, but to add to it. Throughout my life, I've wondered, why is this not working? I think I'm a pretty good guy. Why don't you bless me? Yes.
I always wonder with the stories, why did God tell her the story to begin with? Why didn't he just let it all play out and he would be in control? By him telling her what was gonna happen, they wanted to be in control.
Yeah, hadn't thought of that one. Yeah. Yes. Last comment.
A couple of weeks ago, we talked, when we were talking about Ruth and Naomi, we talked about the person.
Oh, yeah.
The personality goes all the way back to Sarah,
Yeah.
the Jewish mother who wants to control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kept on going.
Okay, everybody in this story had something in common with well, in the area of diet. First thing Satan tempted Jesus with.
Oh. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Let me ask you this.
You get it.
God has a habit of choosing flawed people to achieve great good. God has a habit of choosing flawed people. Yes.
Because he doesn't have anything else.
That's right.
Yes.
I'm laughing, but I didn't hear what you said.
Anybody else to choose from but flawed people?
Well, you're absolutely right on that one. Absolutely right. Who could say who's a hypocrite today? Let me leave you with this, and I want to read the story. I have come to the realization that our lives are just one story after another. That's what makes life interesting, is your story. You all have a story. You all do. How you got here, where you started, what happened along the way. How did I pick myself up from that? Oh, we enjoyed that blessing so much. We have had our defeats, our triumphs. We've been knocked down, got back up. And we judge people. We judge people as candidates that might not be able to help you, candidates that are so far gone, just write them off. We judge people. I want to read you a story about somebody I judged. For many years, each morning I would start the day off at the Waffle House on Shalifer Road across from the mall. It gave me a chance to have a cup of coffee and read the paper before I began my day. All this was going just fine until about 25 years ago when one morning I was sitting at my favorite stool and this older, skinny, tall, balding man with thick black rimmed glasses whose teeth did not fit together clacked when he talked and sat down at the other end of the bar. The waitress says, "What are you having this morning, Bob?" And he replies, "The same GD thing I have every effing morning when I come in here. Bacon and egg on white bread toasted and hold the blankety blank this and that, and I need it now." The waitress smiled, and this was apparently just another routine day for Bob. He was somewhat loud, somewhat rude, and I quickly decided I didn't like this guy and hopefully would be finishing each morning before he arrived. Somehow I began to show up each morning just when I would be sitting down, and each morning he seemed to be getting one stool closer to me. I began to notice that he would be smiling when he would be saying these terrible things to the workers. This apparently was his crude way of being sociable. Finally, the dreaded day arrives that he's sitting next to me. He comes in and sits down and looks at me and says, "Hi." And I turn with my paper in hand and look over carefully and reluctantly say, "Good morning." Not much is said at first, but soon after we begin to talk. About what, I don't remember. But I find out after a few mornings, he and his wife of many years are separated. I sense he's very unhappy, frustrated, and not well physically. I soon learn he has 2 daughters and a stepson. The daughters are married and live here in Chattanooga. I don't remember where the stepson lived. I also begin to sense that this old guy is smart. And I don't mean bright. I mean highly intelligent. Little did I know just how intelligent this guy was. He begins to discuss places he's lived, which was everywhere in Europe and the Mideast. He said it was a consultant and been recently consulting at Oak Ridge. That makes your antennas go up. He went to see the nukes. Way, way up here. He at times is still nasty and rude to the health, but he can tell I'm not impressed by his harassing methods, and he begins to curb this type of behavior. A couple of weeks go by, and now we have a standing date each morning. He's very interesting, fun to talk to about the stock market. He's become a day trader. A couple of weeks go by, and now we have, well, I read that. He comes in one morning depressed. His cat has died. He keeps saying, "I can't believe I was so attached to that old cat, but I miss him desperately." He is ready to break down, and I quickly change the subject. Bob is changing. Each morning he's becoming more thoughtful, nicer, easier to deal with. He's poking fun at the black lady who's doing the cooking. At times she turns and says, "Shut up, Bob, I don't have to cook for you." The whole place roars in laughter. A few mornings pass, and Bob suddenly starts talking about his wife and how he needs to get home and finish a project before she comes home from work. I don't ask about where she's been or what's happened, but Bob is now changing for the better, and I mean he's changing fast. I begin to hear what a great wife Bob has, and he tells me how lucky he is and how beautiful his daughters are. He brings me pictures of his family. He tells me stories of how he grew up in Brainerd, Minnesota. Ever heard of that one? Brainerd, Minnesota? How his grandfather was a trapper and how as a boy he would go out and check the trouts in the woods, in the snow, and be in the snow. This was near the Canadian border. Tells me of how a wolf would follow him all day and he would camp at night in the woods. He tells me of how he was deep in the woods and decided to cross a frozen lake one day and he falls through. And how he has the presence of mind to try and float straight up. He will be surfacing at the hole where he entered. He's young. He's only 12 or 13 years old when he's doing this. How he climbed out of that lake, found a sunny place on the bank and built a fire. He tells me when he's in the 10th grade of how he worked at a bakery that baked loaves of bread. It was done in a little machine built like a Ferris wheel. And each seat, there was a loaf of bread in it. And how the machine would break down and how valuable time would be lost waiting for a repairman to come from across the town. The whole system would have to be cooled down so the repairman could enter the oven. He tells me that one day when the machine was broke, he asked his supervisor if he would let him fix it. The man asks if he thinks he can. Bob tells him to wrap him in wet towels and cool down the system just enough to keep him from burning. The machine is chain driven. He makes the repair, hardly any time is lost, and the owner of the bakery walks out into the plant, not believing what's just happened. He looks at Bob and says, "You have a job here anytime you want it, kid." He tells me of how the great logging mills in Minnesota would float down logs down the river where he lived, and they would be held in a large lake waiting to be loaded. Kids were hired to count the logs. Only most of the time you would fall in the lake trying to count them. Bob tells me of how he went to the boss at the lake and made a deal with him. He asked him, if I can tell you how many logs are in the entire lake right now, would you pay me $10? Now, this is like 1940 probably. And the guy says, yeah, but it's impossible. Bob goes home, gets his mother's old camera, gets a family friend who has a plane to take him up over the lake. He takes a picture of the logs in the lake. His mother works at the Kodak plant there in Brainerd. He takes the film to her. She blows it up, poster size. He counts each log that night in the picture and numbers them. Takes the picture to the man at the lake. The man is flabbergasted and gives Bob $10. I'm amazed by these stories. All along, he says he never went to college, but he keeps saying he's a consulting engineer. He tells me he's working with UTC in the Spanish department. And foreign languages. But Bob, I said, I thought you told me you never went to college. He would just smile and say, I didn't. One morning, he tells me he won't be in for a few days. He's getting some tests. He contracted rheumatic fever as a child and his heart is damaged. Bob is getting weaker each day and I see it, but he's so tough and so stubborn, it vanishes when he begins to talk. One day I get a call from Bob's wife, whom I'd never met. I had told her if he went into the hospital to call me, and she did. I go down and visit. She's very nice, very low key, a lovely lady in her 60s. She leaves so Bob and I can talk. Bob looks terrible. He's on oxygen. I can tell he's glad I came and he wants to talk. So what do you say to a guy dying? I'm not a minister. So,
Tell him you love him.
So finally I asked him just out of the blue, I said, how in the world did you become an engineer if you never went to college? And his eyes light up. He motions for me to get some more pillows so he can sit up. He says, oh, now that's an amazing, interesting story. And off we go on one of the most amazing adventures I have ever heard. He took his first job at an automobile dealership in the parts department, which was in the mess. Bob's other grandfather, opposite the trapper, had owned a Packard automobile dealership in the 1930s, and he trained Bob in the car business. He quickly organizes the parts department. The owner is so impressed, he tells Bob to go out into the body shop and help fix the problems out in the body shop. Bob knows nothing about wrecked cars, but starts working with the man and soon starts repairing fenders, doors, and learns to paint. Bob's first wife is pregnant, and they lose the baby due to her diabetic condition. Her conditions keep piling up doctor bills. And Bob said, I'm constantly just trying to pay one off and then we'll have another miscarriage. And then he said, I'm getting buried in debt. So in this part of Minnesota, TWA Airlines is just becoming of age. And in those days, according to Bob, the pilots ran everything. One day a pilot comes in with his car wrecked and Bob repairs the car. The pilot loves the work. Soon after, he calls Bob and says his boss, the chief pilot, has wrecked his cars and he needs the car fixed fast, as in 1 week. Bob tells him to bring it in. Bob takes the car's repaired in record time, and the chief pilot wants to take Bob out for a drink and dinner to thank him for doing the impossible. While they're at the restaurant, the pilots begin to talk about a serious problem at the new airport that's being built. And the chief pilot is in charge of the construction. And they got a big problem. Bob asks what the problem is, and the pilot tells him that the new one runway, which is made out of concrete, is sinking in the middle. So you can see it's going to be a little tough for a plane to land with this going. They can't land and they can't take off. Bob listens for a while and then tells him he thinks he knows what the problem is and he can fix it. The pilots are skeptical, but after much conversation, they decide to listen. Bob tells him to be at the airport the next morning with some concrete trucks and some high pressure hoses and big ones. Bob has some hose drills in the area of where it's sinking and where it's collapsed. He forces the hose in the hole and seals it off. Concrete is then pumped in or forced to the hose As pressure is applied, the hose bursts. Chief Pilot begins to panic, but Bob assures him all will be well, but he said, "You didn't give me high pressure hoses." Pilot asked for those hoses to be brought in. They're over the hose, the concrete is forced in, and the sinking concrete begins to move up. And just when it's on grade, Bob has them stop. It's perfect. Pilot looks around to the other employees and said, "Will this work?" They said, "Well, it will." So the chief pilot tells Bob to go ahead and finish, but Bob stops the pilot right in his tracks and wants to know what he'll be paid for his work. The chief pilot asks, what he wants, and Bob tells him, he said, "I want so much a square foot." And, the guy says, "You are out of your mind." They argue. Bob knows he has no choice. So the guy pays and says, "I'll pay that." And as he's turning around to walk away, he says, "If anybody asks you what you're doing here, you report to me. Tell them you're a consulting engineer. Don't talk to anybody else." So as he turns to leave, Bob says, "Hey, can I put that on my resume?" "I don't care where you put it. Just finish." So from that day forward, Bob was a consulting engineer for TWA. Eventually, Bob would help design some of the early launching pads for NASA. He would live at Cape Canaveral. He would live in Saudi Arabia and building entire towns for Amoco Oil. He would live in Spain, working again for NASA. All the while, the chief pilot would be taking all the credit, and Bob would be doing all the thinking. I asked him, "How did you know that concrete would work with those pumps?" He said, "It's all about hydraulics, kids. You either get it right off the bat, or you're lost for the rest of your life." On his deathbed, he makes me promise I'll take my kids to Disney World at Christmas. I try to explain to him, this will be the millennium, 2000. It'll be the biggest day in the history of the world there. And he gets really upset when I start resisting. He starts rattling. I said, "Just calm down. I'll take them." Enough. Bob weakens in the next few days, and his wife speaks with me alone. She tells me how terribly important it was that I'd committed to see Bob each day. How much Bob looked forward to me coming to the hospital. She said, "You know, Bob has no friends. I think he sees himself in you when he was in his 40s. He reflects back to those days when he was important. And so many men reported to him. When he wore nice clothes like you have. When he was handsome and strong. When we took the girls on vacation. I think seeing you has given him hope, and that hope has made him want to try hard to live a little longer." It finally dawned on me why Bob had no friends and why he appeared so rude to people. It was because he was so far ahead of us mentally, he just couldn't hang around and wait on us to catch up. Just got tired of people trying to catch up when he saw it so quickly. It also dawned on me why Bob came into my life. Bob was sent to me because I needed some living hope. He was sent to me because I felt at the time I had nothing to give, or more aptly, I didn't want to give. Bob died 25 years ago. Try never to go back into that Waffle House on Shalford Road. It seems empty. Well, I've started going back. That's where I met the girl that's trying to stay clean after 5 months. We always want to judge a book by its cover. Bob was old, he was beat up, and his cover was damaged. What if I'd simply blown off Bob that day? What if I'd walked out and gone to another restaurant? What if I'd never heard this incredible story about this phenomenal human being? First day I saw Bob, I judged him. My judgment almost caused me to miss a treasure. We judge. Tell you, we need to be very good. Next week, Doug Tiskel will be here in person. We'll pick up the second story on Jacob. And I hope I can see you next week. Just remember, our job here is hopefully that you will feel better off when you leave than when you came in. Don, you have our prayer.
Father, thank you for bringing us all here today, opening up our hearts listening to your word. Help us get a great appreciation for this message, how it impacts each one individually, personally. Help us be more inspired, to walk the path that you have created for us. Thank you for your son, Jesus.
Don't forget about the potluck. We'll see you next week. Thank you for coming.
Don't forget to leave your names here.